Welcome back. We're looking at Song of Solomon again. Today we're looking at just two verses, chapter 6, verses 11 and 12, although we're going to look at the context around it, which will take us several verses further than that. But I'm going to focus on just verses 11 and 12. This is, I think, perhaps the most confusing verse in the entire book. Let me read it first. Verse 11 says, I went down to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded or the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was aware, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people. All right, so the confusing verse is verse 12. I thought it was confusing when I first read it. I was a little unsure who was speaking. I didn't know if this was the woman saying this or the man saying this. But as I looked into it further, I discovered that the commentaries also think this is the most confusing verse in the entire book. And that's because when you dig into the Hebrew, it's really, really unclear. Now, I didn't know that, not knowing any Hebrew, but it turns out nobody knows quite what this means. So I'm going to do something a little bit unusual with this. I'm going to talk about not just what I think it means. I'm going to talk about all the different possibilities that are out there and sort of show you what some of the questions are. Now, I don't like just leaving it there because I don't want to just leave you the questions. I want to give you something edifying and encouraging to take away from it. So at the end, I will tell you what my take on it is and what I think it means. But I want you to know what all the possibilities are, and you may have a different understanding of it, and that's certainly okay with me, as long as you're grounding your understanding of what you see in the scriptures. So, why is this confusing to the commentaries? Why is it confusing to the people who know Hebrew? Well, first of all, this is what it literally means, what it literally says in the Hebrew, according to, I got this from a commentary known as Ellicott's commentary. It literally says, I did not know, my soul put me, chariots of my people, noble. I did not know, my soul put me, chariots of my people, noble. So you can sort of see this. I did not know in New American Standard is before I was aware. My soul set me is my soul put me. And then the over, they're just sort of assuming. And then chariots of my people, and then noble, which they say over the chariots of my noble people. Now, here's where this starts to get complicated. First of all, the word for soul could very easily also be desire. I did not know, my desire put me, chariots of my people, noble. Secondly, noble could be princes, noble people. I did not know, my soul put me, chariots of my people, princes. Third of all, the word my people could be the word Aminadab. It could be a place name, a name, the chariots of Aminadab. And some translations translate it that way. There wasn't Aminadab mentioned in Scripture, but this wouldn't presumably be him. It might be. There might have been just that there's something we don't know about, that the chariots of Aminadab were known for being, for example, very fast chariots. That's what some people speculate. Or it may be chariots of my people. It's hard to know. So anyway, you have all these different confusing possibilities. And here's some of the different ways people translate it. I'm using New American Standard from 1995, which, as you know, says, before I was aware, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people. Here's King James. Or ever I was aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Aminadab. Notice it uses the word Aminadab instead of chariots of my people, or my noble people. And notice that it uses made me like the chariots instead of set me over the chariots. Because remember, the Hebrew didn't give a preposition there that was really clear. New King James translates it this way. Before I was even aware, my soul had made me as the chariots of my noble people. My soul became like a chariot, or I became like a chariot. NIV says this, before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. It assumes here that noble means the chariots are noble or royal. And my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. ESV says, before I was aware, my desire set me among the chariots of my kinsman. A prince made me a prince. Before I realized it, says NLT, my strong desires had taken me to the chariot of a noble man. Notice, by the way, that some of these are assuming that the woman is speaking it, and some of these are assuming that the man is speaking it. For example, the ESV version assumes that the man is speaking it. Before I was aware, my desire set me among the chariots of my kinsman and made me a prince. I became a king. And NLT assumes that it's the woman speaking it. Before I realized that my strong desires had taken me to the chariot of a nobleman, set me beside Solomon. I didn't know what was happening to me. I felt like I was in a chariot with a nobleman, says the CSB. This is interesting. They assume that it means I was like a chariot or like being in a chariot. And then finally, the Message I figured I'd put in for good measure translates it this way. Before I knew it, my heart was raptured, carried away by lofty thoughts. And that's actually not too bad, because whatever is going on here, I think that's the essence of what it's saying. So here's how I guess it might mean. It might simply be saying, look, I was just thinking about spring and then romance, see whether I went to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded, whether the pomegranates had bloomed. It was very fragrant, it's very romantic, it's very springy, and I started thinking about it. And suddenly I found myself head over heels in love. And whatever this means, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people, or whatever else it means, it's somehow saying, before I was aware, my just sort of speculating on is it time for love suddenly became full-fledged love. I think that's kind of the idea of the passage, but I'm not sure. So that's the first thought. Somehow it's talking about something happening suddenly, and it does seem to connect to the rest of the passage as that suddenly having something to do with romance, something to do with love. So I think this is saying, before I knew it, I was head over heels in love. I'm thinking about this as being something the man says, but as you saw, some translations assume this is something the woman says. All right, let's do some more thinking about this. Let's look at the context. I'm going to read about 15 verses now, or parts of them, to show you what this is in the middle of. First of all, last time we ended with the chorus saying, who is this that grows like the dawn, as beautiful as the full moon, as pure as the sun, as awesome as an army with banners? I mentioned that because the army part might still be relevant. We'll look at that in a minute. I went down to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded or the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was aware, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people. Come back, O Shulamite. Come back, that we may gaze at you. Why should you gaze at the Shulamite, as at the dance of the two companies? How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The curves of your hips are like jewels. And then about 3 or 4 more verses, which is another wasf, another description of the woman's beauty from head to foot, except this time it goes upside down. It's from foot to head. Starts with the feet and moves upwards. Closing out with, the king is captivated by your tresses. How beautiful and how delightful you are, my love, with all your charms. And then a little bit later, a few more verses later, I'm skipping over it, the woman responds and says, it goes down smoothly for my beloved, flowing gently through the lips of those who fall asleep. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. And then she says, come, my beloved, let us go out into the country. Let us spend the night in the villages. Let us rise early and go to the vineyards. Let us see whether the vine has budded and its blossoms have opened, and whether the pomegranates have bloomed. You might remember those phrases. Those are the same things that started the whole thing. I went to see if the vine has budded, if the blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates have bloomed. And here she repeats that at the end, says, let's go out into the country and see. There I will give you my love. So that's why I included everything down to this part, is because these closing sentences seem to reflect the opening sentences. Maybe it's all one song. So anyway, let's think about some of the context clues. What are the connections to the context that we see here? Number 1, is there a connection between the army and the chariots? They just simply said she's as awesome as an army with banners. And now he or she, somebody says, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people. So it's possible that the chariots here are supposed to remind us of the army, and that this is part of the previous song. I don't think so, but it's a possibility, so I want to point it out to you. Second, later on, she says, why should you gaze at the Shulamite as at the dance of the two companies? Now, companies could be dancing companies here, but they could also be armies. Companies here could mean armies. So maybe the army and the chariots and the companies are still all military metaphors. And somehow this is saying, I'm like an army, but why should you be looking at us as you would look at armies? And some commentators think the dance of the two companies here mean the orchestrated movement of armies around each other. It's comparing the woman to that. So again, I'm not quite sure I think that's the connection here, but I want to point it out to you because some people think it is, and I want to give you all the possibilities. Third, notice that it says, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people, and they say, come back, come back. Some people think that what's happening here is that she's running away. Before I was aware, my soul set me over the chariots of my noble people, that what she actually means, I jumped in the chariots and took off. I was running back home. I was running away from Solomon. And they say, wait, come back, we want to see you. And she says, why should you gaze at me? I'm running away. So there is some people who think that this is a passage where she's running away. And that's a possibility. Fourth, the word come back could also mean turn around, turn. And it might not mean turn around as in come back, it might be turn around as in spin, because it goes on to talk about dancing. And so there's some commentaries and some people who think that what's happening is they're saying, turn around, Shulamite. We want to watch you dance. Let us see you as you move. And that's what this is talking about. It has nothing to do with her leaving or not leaving. It has to do with her spinning as she dances. And to think more about the dancing, it says, why should you gaze at the Shulamite as at the dance of two companies? And then he goes on to give a wasp from foot to head. And that wasp seems to be very apt for somebody who's dancing. How beautiful are your feet in sandals. The curves of your hips are like jewels. Think of somebody with their feet in sandals dancing and their hips swaying, and that's what this is talking about. And there's good reason to sort of see that here. This wasp might be about the bride or the woman in motion rather than standing still, and it's about her dancing. And in that case, then the comeback might be turn, and it might be about dancing. So that's another connection to the context. And then finally, the one I started with, not many people talk about this, but it seems really important to me. He starts by saying, I went to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossoms of the valley, whether the vine had budded, whether the pomegranates had bloomed. And she says, at the end, let's see whether the vine has budded, or the blossoms have opened, and whether the pomegranates have bloomed. So it seems to me that the very first verse we started with in chapter 6, verse 11, and the verse we ended up with in 7, verse 12, are connected to each other. So either it's all one song, or the next song or two reflects back to this one and says, remember what you said back in 6:11? Here's what I'm saying now. And that's something I'm going to rely on as I look at my interpretation of this. So here's why it's so complicated. First of all, in the Hebrew, nobody knows what it means. And that's beyond me. I don't know Hebrew. I'm just reading what the commentaries tell me. And secondly, the context clues, there's a lot of them, and they all seem to be pushing in different directions, and it's hard to put them all together. And third, we don't know who's speaking, the man or the woman. So here's my tentative take. You do not have to buy this at all, but this is what I'm assuming because I wanted to at least assume something. All right, I think that this is the man speaking. And when he says, I went to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded or the pomegranates had bloomed, that's all metaphorical for love, for spring and for love. Partly for springtime, partly for romance, partly for love. And he says, I was just sort of casually wondering how my love life was going. And then before I was aware, I think this means before I was aware, I was captured, I was drawn up, caught up in being in love. So I read this as the man saying, I was thinking about spring and romance and wondering what life had in store for me. And before I knew it, I was head over heels in love. Now, it might not be what it says, but that's the way I'm taking it for now. And then we have kind of a detour to the dance scene. They say to her, come back, O Shulamite, come back, or that is, turn around, perhaps, that we may gaze at you. And she says, why should you gaze at me? So they say, dance for us, and she's uneasy about being made a spectacle. And then he intervenes and says, you are so beautiful. I love watching you. You're so attractive to me. And she says, well, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. So he praises the woman and reassures her of his love, and she recognizes and accepts the love he has. She recognizes that for him, at least, she is beautiful, and it's okay with her if he gazes at her. I'm not sure how she feels about the chorus, but she's okay with him. And then she says, well, let's go somewhere private. Come with me. Let's go into the country, spend the night in the villages, rise early, and we'll go see the vineyards and the budding of the blossoms and the pomegranates. I'll accept your love. I'll return your love for me, and there we will be together. So I think that's sort of the way the whole thing works together. Now, again, you don't have to buy that. I just wanted to show you not only what I thought, but some of the other possibilities, and you can sort of work it out for yourself. But if this is the case, then what's the point? The point for us is, first of all, about human love, is that human love can surprise us when we least expect it. And I think we need to be ready. I think if you're a young man or woman, you need to be ready and open to the possibility that God may bring somebody into your life, and you will find yourself in a place you've never been before. You'll just be moving along and living life as usual, and you'll find yourself head over heels in love. And this is particularly important to be open to in a day when everybody's just into promiscuity and just having as much fun physically as you can. That's not the point. The point is to be open to whatever God might bring to your life otherwise. But the metaphorical point for us, I think, is that the love of God can surprise us when we least expect it. If you start thinking about it, that happens a lot. Think about Paul on his way to Damascus, and suddenly he's hit by Jesus' revelation of himself to Paul, and everything changes. And Paul says, wow, that was just, it totally was not, I wasn't expecting it, I wasn't ready for it, and God just completely changed my life. Think about all the times that other people found their lives completely changed when God stepped in and changed what they were about, what they were doing. When Jesus said to the fishermen, come and follow me. When Moses ran into the burning bush, when Isaiah saw the Lord in the temple, God may or may not do this for us, but we need to be ready for the possibility that he will interrupt our lives and change everything. One of my favorite authors is C.S. Lewis. His autobiography is called Surprised by Joy. He was sort of going along and God surprised him and brought him to something he cared far more about than anything he cared about up till then. And it was about joy and desire and longing and finding in God what we needed. All right, so for us, I guess we just need to remember to be open to that. It reminds me of Jesus, who when he came and said, good news, I'm here, a lot of people kind of didn't pay any attention to that. And he said to them, you need to pay attention. Look at the signs. If you see that something new is here, you should be paying attention to it. Don't miss it. Don't miss what God is doing. And he said that in many different ways over and over. So that's all I'm going to say about this. Next week, we're going to talk more about that dance wasp, and the week after about the place where she says, let's go to the country and spend time together there. And then we'll be done with chapter 7. Thanks.